talking about love.
So if you are new to kind of Advent, typically there are 4 weeks of Advent, and each one there's a different word. So hope, now we're on to love, then there's joy and peace. And so now we're moving to our week of love. And to start off this topic of love, we thought it'd be really cool to verse map with you guys and discuss love around Christmas, because I think it's easy for us to talk about a biblical understanding of love for Valentine's Day, but really none of this would have happened if it wasn't for love.
We see God's love most evidently through Jesus, through God sending his son Jesus.
I feel like I'm really tall and really big.
I know, I was gonna say, like, everyone, I am 6 foot. Faith is like 5'7" or so. Just so we're clear, just so we know, I am taller.
Let's verse map together. Galatians 4:4-5. But when the fullness of time had come, God sent forth his son, born of a woman, born under the law, to redeem those who were under the law, so that we might receive adoption as sons.
Galatians 4 in its context comes off of Galatians 3, where it talks about the Abrahamic covenant and the importance of who Abraham was. And then it goes into the section towards the end, which this passage in chapter 4 applies to, is there's no distinction. Male, female, bondservant, maidservant, slave, free, we're all one in Christ Jesus. And this is what brings it together. So this is it in its context. It also talks about in the first part of chapter 4, like someone who is not yet a son. Someone who's like an heir and he hasn't received the inheritance of the promise yet. He's still like a slave. And so chapter 4 starts off by saying that we were enslaved. And it's not until we're brought into the family, brought into sonship, that we see its full realization.
If you guys haven't taken Bible Study Boot Camp, the reason why I asked for context first is that's one of the most important things whenever you're verse mapping, is to start with context. And that's why I wrote it here, for us just to keep it in mind when we're mapping out this verse, breaking it down. But the next thing that I really would love to do is look at how this starts off with a conjunction, which means whatever we're about to map is in contrast or against what is right before that. So let's check out the verse right before verse 4. If you guys want to take Bible Study Boot Camp and learn how to like verse map doing stuff like this with me, check it out. It's linked down in my description box. Starting in verse 1, what I'm saying is that as long as an heir is a child, he's no different from a slave, although he is the owner of everything. He is subject to guardians and trustees until the date set by his father. So also when we were children, we were enslaved under the basic principles of the world. And then, but when the fullness of time comes. So this but is against our sin, enslaved, and I would say it directly correlates with the references to the law here. Wouldn't you agree? The law is what condemns us. Because of our sin, we're enslaved to. So I'm gonna circle those in the same color.
So it says when the fullness of time had come. Time at its fullest point was there, and it was at that moment that Jesus entered in. It was the best moment. It was the best time that it could possibly be, because the fullness of time was met whenever Jesus came to this earth in God's perfect plan.
That Greek word I just wrote for fullness is pleroma, and it's fullness, completion, the filling. I picture like an overflow and the fullness of our need, of our depravity, of our enslavement to sin. He came. And God sent forth. What comes to mind when you think about the Trinitarian role of the incarnation?
Of God sending forth the great display of love. God sending forth his son, we can see from Abraham, and God calling Abraham to sacrifice Isaac, and in like a similar loving way, God sends forth his son as a sacrifice for us.
Moving on. God sent forth his son, born of a woman, born under the law, to redeem those who were under the law, so that we might receive adoption as sons. This sounds to me like a chiasm. Basically, a chiasm is a literary unit where you kind of see this paralleled argument. Born under the law, to redeem those under the law, born of a woman, and then so that we might receive adoption as sons. It kind of takes us through, I don't know how to describe this, but I wouldn't be surprised if people labeled this as a chiasm.
Yeah, I see where you're doing.
But let's talk about like what's the significance of being born under a woman?
It shows a few things. One, it shows the great humanity of Jesus, that Jesus was fully man, and it shows the comparison of being born of a woman. It shows the closeness to this earth and also the humbleness that the status of women were in the day. Like it just said before, there is no distinction male, female, maidservant, and bondservant, for we're one in Christ Jesus. But still, like, this outlines the humanity of Christ and the humility of entering into this world.
Yeah, it also, I feel like, totally brings us back to Genesis 1 and Genesis 3 with the fall and the curse over the woman, but then still the promise that she would bring forth that Messiah. And then born under the law.
Christ willingly submitted himself to the law to fulfill the law. That was the goal. And so he submitted himself under the law to bring the law to its most fullest fruition.
Yeah, you can't redeem someone that owes a huge debt without fulfilling that debt, fulfilling the rules that that debt has to be filled by.
Yeah, so he was born human, very much entering into a broken world, submitting himself to the law and living a perfect and sinless life.
So he has to fulfill the law to redeem us so that we might receive adoptions as son. If anybody else is like me and thinking in the same brainwave as me, you might be like, why'd you go there with like adoption? Like, what's the theological significance that Paul is trying to communicate here?
A lot of this audience is females. A lot of Faith's audience, Had Faith of Life, is females. And so you might be wondering, like, why doesn't it say sons and daughters here? Why does it say sons? I would just say, like, here, it's good, like, you want to be a son because the sons here would receive the inheritance. And so we all together are receiving the inheritance, that it's like an adoption, we're brought into the family, and we have this wonderful inheritance that we can lay claim to, that we can hold on to, that we can look forward to.
It's this status of a relationship with God bought by the Son himself. I heard it once described this way, and I will never forget, as if God looks at us and he sees the identity of Christ because we've been bought by him and we have his righteousness, that robe of righteousness Isaiah 61 or 62 talks about, on us. And so when God looks at us, he sees Christ's righteousness. And so therefore we have the status of Christ. We have that sonship, that inheritance, though we are so undeserving. We could spend so much more time unpacking this verse. When verses like this stick out to you this Christmas, take that as a great opportunity to turn it into a Bible study. And again, our heart behind this is to reclaim Christmas. Make sure to check out our previous episodes where we did other Bible studies and Christmassy things.
This is also a great verse to memorize. I challenge you to do it.
I will see you guys in this playlist where you can catch up on our previous episodes. See you guys there.